Hello again to the webinar how to develop and operate interfaces in SAP with Realtek's Interface Manager. My name is Thorsten Thal and I will guide you through today's webinar. I'm the product manager for the Interface Manager and member of the SAP product management team in Realtek. And today's demo of the Interface Manager will be held by Rita Santos, my colleague, who is the development lead for the Interface Manager. Hello and welcome, Rita.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Just for your information, this webinar will be recorded and we make it available afterwards. And if you have any questions, we will, of course, be happy to answer them. You can use either the chat window or write us an email, and we will check at the end how many time we have. Then we will answer the questions. And if it's not enough time, then we will answer the questions after the webinar via mail. Today's goal is to show you how important interfaces are for the daily business in your companies and how smart it is to have a tool like the Interface Manager, which enables you to develop and run these interfaces, any kind of interfaces you're using. I mean, with the last years in most companies, the IT landscapes got more and more complex, as you know, of course, and you have a lot of internal and external components and they need to be connected and exchange data for your core business processes. Some are, of course, different SAP modules, but often also other components from external. And our tool, which is centrally installed in SAP, will help you to run these interfaces, which are complex, some are not so complex, to speed up your automation of processes. This, of course, will reduce also the number of problems you have, and at the end, it will save you money. Let's go and have some examples of interfaces we can assume which are at your site. Let's take, for example, the retail store. A retailer has a lot of individual stores, and it's very important that the stores exchange data continuously. That means during the day, at certain times, for example, at the end of the day, or a morning before they start. Of course, when the quarterly reports are or the fiscal annually reports are coming. So there's important data like master data, but also let's take data from cash levels and sales levels, and these are only examples. This data must be exchanged, and via interfaces, you have a very easy connection between these retail locations and your central, for example, fiscal finance SAP system. And you can, of course, also send price changes and also the sales data in both directions. This can, of course, be triggered automatically. For example, at the end of the day, at the end of the month, year, and for example, the data from the cashier itself goes directly each evening to the SAP system. And imagine before, of course, lots of these works were done manually, or there were problems because the data has to be transferred in difficult ways. And with easy interfaces, you can directly move this data. This is only one example for the retail. Then let's go probably to an area where it's very, very important to have very well-designed interfaces. It's in the logistics area. In logistics, you have local warehouses, you have plants, all are connected to central SAP systems, logistics, EVM, and there's lots of data exchange, and via these well-designed interfaces, your whole supply chain could be automated. For instance, let's take an example, for example, from an automotive company. You have various interfaces, for example, for ordering spare parts for your manufacturing sites from plants all over the world, which produces spare parts. So you have a lot of actions which are triggered via these interfaces. Just as an example, you have a worldwide connection of these regional plants to the spare parts, which produces spare parts, and to your construction plants. You can check for if minimum stock levels are reached, then you trigger the orders which are corresponding to these. You can automatically schedule reorders. Also, the whole scheduling can when should what be delivered where could all be done via this interfaces. The whole dispatch and shipping process can be controlled, and of course also the stock storage and all this stuff. And even at the end, your interfacing, I said, sorry, your interface webinar, the invoicing takes place automatically via interfaces. So your whole process is automated and with the support of interfaces, which could be in this case, of course, quite complex. Let's go for one last example. Take the manufacturing area, for example. And if you have machineries, the machinery can send data like key performance indicators and also maintenance plans directly to other systems. And also this leads that the analysis of these machines and your process of production can be optimized with this data, also with not too much effort. And if you also go in details, you will see you can integrate your production machines via interfaces directly into the IT. You have, of course, a much higher level of production control with frameworks of digitalization. You can get machine data, feedback data, running times, technical status, and all these stuff. And of course, also a lot of other indicators from these machines. And as I said, with this information and the feedback you have from your machines, if you take the data, of course, you can speed up your processes, and you can do a lot of analyzing and also optimizing without additional money to spend. And for example, even if the machine, for example, is not your own machine, if it's a machine from somebody else, and you do all the invoices afterwards, how much you have to pay him for the machine, for example, also this can be all done via interfaces, because the number of pieces produced a day, a week, a month, and all this stuff you can get over. I think these three examples were nice examples to see that you can have very complex interfaces in your companies, and that is really the need of a tool which helps you to create, to design these interfaces in an easy way, and also to run them afterwards in a very good way, that you don't have any problems afterwards. Before starting with the next part, I would like to do a small poll. So I would ask my colleague to put the question for you there. It's just a short click. The question is, who is operationally responsible for interface management in your company? So please do a fast click, and afterwards then we go on. Okay, thank you very much. You did choose, and it's interesting. Nearly the half of you has the interfaces managed in the SAP basis team, and the other half has a dedicated interface team. Only if you have an external provider or doing it in the business department. Okay, then we will show you that also some part of this handling of interfaces can be handed over to the business department, because the monitoring and error reprocessing, for example, in the Realtex Interface Manager can be done also from people outside of SAP Basis, or a special interface team can also be done in the business department. Okay, then let's go on. I talked to you about the importance of interfaces in your landscape, and now I will show you how our interface manager will help you to develop and operate your interfaces more efficiently. If you go for the three important points, it's you have the design, the operation, and the optimization. In the developing phase, it is, of course, at the beginning important to do a well design with the concerned departments and with the people. An interface should be designed very slim and as easy as possible. And of course, you need a smart tool which enables you to develop these interfaces. Realtek's Interface Manager is a low-code tool. It runs directly in SAP in a central transaction, and it is very good because it's a standard software, but it offers you a really large variety of possibilities you will later see in the demo. You can use for creating interfaces. So you have a standard tool, but you have a very, very large variety to customize and create your interfaces. You do this customization and can configure also very complex interfaces. And at the end of all these customization steps, you will generate the corresponding code automatically with one click. So you don't need really ABAP programmers to develop the interfaces because it's a low-code tool. After designing the interfaces, of course, it's important that you run the interfaces properly. So the Interface Manager from Realtek offers you a very comprehensive monitoring with a lot of possibilities in monitoring and also in different ways of alerting options. You have your interfaces in this way always under control, and this monitoring is really an integral part of our software, so there's no additional modules. It's a core part of the software, and this monitoring via authorizations, for example, can also be handled by the business department, which uses the interfaces. And of course, this could help that the problems are solved faster, because the business department, when they see the error in the interface, they hopefully know better what to do now, because it's their interface and they know what happens in this interface, and they don't have only the technical view. Of course, fewer incidents and will mean less downtimes, and at the end you increase your efficiency, and this at the end will save you money and reduce your costs. After operating and before the designing, of course, there's a phase we call optimize. That means, of course, there's still something you can do and make your interfaces better, or if there's an error, that you can easily solve this error in the interface. So you have different ways to improve your optimization or your automation at this point. You can optimize interfaces, for example, in triggering interfaces in parallel, or you can also run interfaces in chains. And of course, you can do this with existing interfaces. If you see after some time, hey, it's better if we put these interfaces in a kind of row. No, they rely on each other. Then or you can create, of course, an additional one and put them with existing one in a row. So you can also use this interface manager to optimize your processes, your automation again, to go for the next round. And there's also an easy error handling. That means if you have an error in an interface, you can easily check it. There are help windows, what to do. You can check what the problem is, and often you can already, as a business department, you can see, okay, there's a problem in, I don't know, what take as an example, if the product should for example, there's a wrong plant in an interface, and then you can correct something like the plant, and afterwards you can do the reprocessing as business department, and this reprocessing then with the right plant will work. Sorry. Okay, after some theoretical input, I will hand over now to my colleague Rita Santos. She will show you the demo of the Interface Manager. So Rita, it's up to you.
So by calling the transaction for the Interface Manager, we end up here in this main screen, where we have the different parts which Torsten already mentioned. So on the bottom part, we have the part, the phase where we call the design phase, where all the interfaces are going to be built up based on the concept which have been defined by your business processes. So at this point, you should decide if you will have an interface based on complexity levels, or in the other way, if there would be interfaces connected with each other and just simple interfaces levels. So what do we do here in this design phase? We define what is going to be done in the interface. So the two parties which will use the interface will align on the record structures, which will be used for the data exchange. They will be created here in this area, So basically, you create a record structure and then just also with fields on it, and then you can just drag and drop fields into the record structure that you want to use. Once you are ready with these changes, then you just have to generate the record structure, and you would be ready to use your structure which was aligned between the parties. After that, then you have the conversion mapping. So if necessary, for example, if you're using interfaces worldwide, there are differences, for example, between dates in the different countries. So one of the most common usages that we have is, for example, the date conversion, like in the US area, for example, they use the months before the day and then the year. Here in Europe, we use the day before the month. So here in the rule builder, you can define conversion methods like that. Or even, for example, if you receive an external number and you want to transform it to an internal number that you use on your SAP site, then you can directly do mapping conversions based on tables definitions that you can use with your defined by your business unit. So how do we actually do this? Here in this area of the program builder, we can define our interface itself. So the first thing to define is if we are talking about an inbound or an outbound interface. And in the outbound interface, for example, I would have to show you something like downloading material data. So basically, I would have an area where I can just define what kind of selection criteria I want to include on my data, and then define what kind of fields or what kind of data I want to extract and be able to send it in the structures that I have assigned. Okay, all this is based on definitions here that you can do by just changing here and then defining, for example, which tables, or for example, if you already have functionalities that are already developed by you that you can use, or for example, function module which are already existing in the SAP world that you can also use for getting this information. So for example, here what I'm doing is selecting everything which is coming from this table only by assigning this to the field. Then I have the extract. The extraction is exactly where I choose which fields I want to have it, and then it maps directly to my file structures by assigning directly the fields here. I can activate or deactivate here the fields, or even add more if necessary to enhance the interface itself. Of course, also one possibility would be to add extra record structures if needed. So it's very flexible because you can keep adding information to your structures to your file structure of the interface without having to do any coding until this point. Okay, so this, once we are ready with this information, then we can just go back. I do not want to change anything at this point. We can just go back and say we are ready with all the interface configuration. At this point, the same way as I did it for the file structure, I can just generate it here, and the code will be generated by the tool itself. One way to see the generated coding is if we directly we can directly see that hundreds of lines of codes have been created until this point, and we didn't do any coding on ourselves. Regarding the inbound information, information, we have the information all defined here in our interface header. We will be allowed to choose here what kind of structure again we want to see. We want to see what kind of load module, and again also the conditions. The load module would be the part where we can define how are we going to store, what are we going to do with our interface. So are we going to use idocs? Are we going to use BAPIs? Are we going to use anything else? So as I was saying, the information for this interface is defined in our header definition. So here we define what kind of information do we need. For example, we can use it later as a web service that or define an API that external parties can use it for the calling of the interfaces, so it can be triggered externally. And here we have agreed the structure already, and then we have here the methods which allow us to decide what exactly do we want to do with our interfaces. So in this case, I have idocs being used, and as a secondary processing. So for example, for reprocessing, I can choose then afterwards if I still want to use idocs, or for example, I would like to use transactions itself to help me understand better what are the errors that I'm getting with the interface execution. Regarding methods which we can use for loading, we have the screen-based. So basically we have lots of information here regarding things which already exist. So also information that you can use. For example, if you already have your own coding, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you don't want to, you can just encapsulate it here, and we can use it as an external load module. This is also featured here in Interface Manager. I do not want to go into too much detail here. So once we, again, so if we go to the file structure here, we again see this, and then we have here the definitions of the how do we want to map all the data for the in this interface. So for example, I have here the idoc, which was the load modules that I used, and then I have here the segments of the idocs which I want to take the information to be able to post the idocs on the SAP side. Okay, so once we are ready with this, and in this case with the screen modules, whatever we want to use to load the data into our SAP system. Then afterwards we can just generate it and we would be ready to use it. So here there's the generation. So if there would be any problem with the configuration of our interfaces, we would see it here, and then we could just navigate to the error and understanding. If it's a development perspective, then we can just navigate to the code and understand better where exactly is the problem and fix it with the customization. So this would be then the design phase. Looks complex, but it's really easy from the perspective of dragging and dropping, activating fields, deactivating fields, and then depending on the complexity of the interface itself. Then we move then to the operation part. In the operation part, we define how is the data being exchanged. So here we can see all our interfaces usage. We can also see some status where they are in. We can jump to the information directly. How are the interfaces being used? So 2A. Yeah. Okay. So here in the execution of the interface, how do we manage this? So basically we can define several, for the same interface program, we can define several executions of the same interface. So for example, if you would be sharing structure with different parties and sharing the same information that you want to load into your SAP, let's say for example that you have different parties giving you information for materials and you just want to load that information in your SAP system. So, and you agree with one party that this party will give you an Excel file, or the data will be coming from a web services, or there will be directly access to an external database for picking up the data. Then this can all be mapped here in this configuration part. Okay. Then how else can we do more? So we can create a lot more with here by having more notification functionalities. So for example, we can decide who gets notified, for example, when something goes wrong. So did we have errors during the execution due to business process, or it was something based on infrastructure which was not working at the time? For example, the system was down or couldn't be accessed from outside. Then we can define here what kind of participants get notified for each thing, and we can even send error logs like what is the problem at the moment, so that someone can directly take over. Something else that we can also have, and this is really important because it's something that where you can definitely optimize your interfaces and business process, is that you can define the error handling of it, so that for example, specific messages would be thrown, and this will help you um, splitting the monitoring of the interfaces, because then directly the specified people will get involved in the process. So there's no need that you have always, for example, a basis administrator or the business unit checking your interfaces all the time. You can just be notified at some point that this is happening. Regarding the operation, then, for example, we can check here what is going on with your interfaces. So if something gets wrong, let's say, for example, that you got notified that this interface got wrong, got errors, how do we do this then? How can we optimize this? By the logs, you can directly see what are the errors, but then we can even go into more details and we can see, okay, here we have the errors, here we have some situation, but wait, what does this mean? Let me check the input. If I want to check the input directly, I can just come here. I don't need to log in into an external server to check what was happening with this file directly. I can just do this from here because all the information is already here. Also, the same thing going with the iDocs. As I said, there was, in this situation, there were iDocs involved, so I can directly jump here and I can see one iDoc, and I can directly jump to the iDocs. I don't need to call external transactions to check what is the issue. And then regarding the errors, we have here something for the optimization. So as I said, we can define specific errors, but if you don't define it, then you can just get the information which SAP throws you based on your loading process. So in this case, for example, I can see directly here that one of the errors for this object was that there is a controller flag. Do I know what this is? No, I actually don't know. Okay, then let's check what was the issue. I can directly see here what was the issue coming from the file. So my controller was 2, and maybe the business unit knows directly what is expected in this case. So if I would be a business unit in this case, I would have the chance either I change it directly here in this process, and I can directly say, oh, this got wrong, this is not a 2, this is a 1. Then I just save it, and I can directly then go for the reprocessing information. So once I go for the reprocessing information in the errors, then I could just directly click the reprocess button. Then I will have here a screen which will tell me directly how do I want to reprocess this. So as I mentioned before, I would have the option either to do it via the iDocs, or I had a secondary option to do it via the transaction. And when I do it via the transaction, then, for example, if I'm a business unit person and I'm very familiar with the process, then I can directly do this quickly. Okay, the same thing goes for the prepared data. So if I do not want to go to the information based on what is coming from the file, I can directly use the information which has already been prepared for the iDocs. So if I want to change it, I'm also able to change it by editing and changing it and then reprocess it directly. So once you reprocess it, then automatically this becomes reprocessed successfully, and it will get out of the error handling and will become part of the reprocessing until it gets a green status with everything successfully processed. How can you else optimize your interfaces? So there's 2 ways to optimize the interfaces, either by optimizing your interfaces via the error handling on the operating processes, or you can even do it by the business process, by creating chains of processes of your creating your business process with several interfaces having chains on it. So you can create simple interfaces and then connect them, link them all on the interfaces. And how do we do that? We can just say, well, this interface will have a subsequent interface, or even can have queuing with more interfaces on it. So this allows you a better optimization and realized about the whole business process with small interfaces connected between them. And with this, I will finalize it. Torsten?
Okay. Thank you very much, Rita, for your short demonstration of the Realtek Interface Manager. I think it was very visible that there's a wide variety to use this interface manager, and also it's a standard tool. You can really have a big possibility in doing lots of different interfaces. So for the end, let's summarize probably a bit. If you're looking for an easy implement standard software which allows you to develop a very extensive variety of interfaces, or if you want to use a low-code tool for customization and for generation of interfaces, even inbound, outbound, and even if you search for an alternative for SAP PIPO, then the interface manager from Realtek is the right solution to choose. In this short meeting, of course, you could not see all, so we would suggest if you are interested, you can look on our website, and of course you can book a real demo, which is longer. You can get also directly in touch with me, and I would appreciate then to help you out. And of course, if you have any kind of questions, feel free to ask me directly. I saw there are some questions. I will just answer the two very short questions. One is, does it run on S4HANA? Yes, of course, it runs on S4HANA. And the second question, is it certified from SAP? And yes, our Realtek Interface Manager is certified from SAP as ABAP add-on for S4HANA. So these very short questions. The other questions we will answer later after the call directly to the people. So for the moment, I say thank you very much for your attention. I hope you got a glance how to develop, optimize, and run interfaces, and how the Realtek Interface Manager helps you to do this with a low-code tool with not too much effort, but also it is a standard tool. You have a big variety. You can do every kind of interface. Normally you would go for programming, but you can do this with our tool too. So please get in touch. And feel free to get directly in touch with me. And then I wish you a very nice day. Thank you very much, Rita. Thank you very much, also Alina in the background. And yeah, have a nice day and a good week. Bye-bye to everybody, and thank you very much for your attention.